नाना पुराण निगमागम सम्मतं यद रामायणे निगदितं क्वचिदन्यतोपि स्वान्तः सुखाय तुलसी रघुनाथ गाथा भाषा निबंध मतिमंजुल मातनोति. That's what Goswami Tulasidas had said about Ramakatha. With that, we begin this talk. On this pious occasion of the 74th birthday of Sri Balamukunda Lohia Department of Sanskrit and Asian Studies, which was previously the Balamukunda Sanskrit Mahavidyalaya, and then Balamukunda Lohia Center of Sanskrit and Asian Studies. I congratulate the Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith and the staff, my colleagues of this department, and particularly Dr. Ambarish Khare, because he shares his birthday with the department. So let us now begin about our topic. The topic I am going to deal with is Ramakatha's and their landscape. Now, it is not just about Ramayana of Valmiki, but it is the Ramakathas, the various stories of Rama. Now, you see, there are several texts which are supposed to be Upajivya Kavyas, and Ramayana, Ramakatha, happens to be one of them. Now, the story of Rama, who was quite a very famous, well-known character, a divine character, or at least a semi-divine character, it comes quite earlier than the Ramayana of Valmiki. Now, there are references to the lineage of Rama right from the Rigveda. For instance, in the 10th mandala of the Rigveda, in the 60th Sukta, we have a reference to the Ikshvakus. Then in the Danastuti Suktas, again of the Rigveda, you have the mention of Dasharatha. Of course, I do not claim that this Dasharatha was certainly related with the Ikshvakus or Rama particularly. Then in 1093 of the Rigveda, you find the name Rama, and he is a king. Even in Mitanni records, you find the name Dasharatha. You find Ikshvakus in the Atharvaveda. Then in the Brahmana of the Rigveda, that is Aitareya Brahmana, you have a character named Rama Margaveya. Then you have Janaka Vaideha in the Taittiriya Brahman. And you also have in the same text a character named Sita Savitri. How about Yajurveda? In the Shukla Yajurveda, Shatapatha Brahmana, you have the name Rama Aupatapasvini. You also have a character named Ashwapati Kaikeya. And there are conversations of Janaka Vaideha and Yajnavalkya in the Shatapatha Brahmana. Then there is a very mysterious text like Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana, wherein you have a character named Rama Kratu Jatiya. In the Taittiriya Aranyaka, you have the character named Ram. Just like Shatapatha Brahmana, you have the conversation of Janaka Vaideha and Yajnavalkya in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. As also you have Janaka Vaideha in Kaushitaki Upanishad and Shankhayana Aranyaka. So there are several characters which later on appear in the Ramakatha and the Ramayana, which you find in the earlier Vedic literature. In the Ramayana itself, you have actually two Janakas. One is the son of Mithi, and the other one is the father of Sita, who is the son of Raswaroma. Now, you find the mention of Janaka as a character even in the Mahabharata as also in the Vayu Purana. So, there was some seed of the story or some characters of the story which were well known from earlier times. And then you find them prevailing in the various Ramakathas as also in the Ramayana of Valmiki. How about Sita? Sita, that is furrow, plowed land, comes as Urvara, fertile land, plowed land. And it is there in the Rigveda. It is also there in the Taittiriya, Aranyaka, in the various Grihya Sutras. So these earlier references, they have the characters of the Ramayana, but they do not have the story of the Ramayana. And the story of the Ramayana only comes during the time of the Buddhist Jatakas, the Jaina texts, early Jaina texts, as also where it is specially recorded as the story of Rama. Now, in the Mahabharata, the Ramakatha appears many a time. For instance, in the Aranyaka Parva, it appears in the Bhishma Hanuman Samvada. And it mentions that Rama was a ruler who had ruled for 11,000 years. There are about 10 verses on the Ramakatha in the Drona Parvan of the Mahabharata. There is a summary of the Ramakatha in the Bhishma Parvan and Ramopakhyana, which is 704 verses. It narrates the complete story of Rama. And the question is asked to Markandeya about why the sorrow has come to the fate of Yudhishthira. And in reply, he narrates the Ramakatha. Now, this Ramakatha is a little different than the Valmiki Ramayana. But it is very important when you take the Ramayana for the critical edition as also the Mahabharata for the critical edition. Of course, I'm not going to deal with this topic. Dr. Amruta Nathu is going to deal with the topic of critical edition of the Ramayana. Now, if you compare statistically Ramayana and Mahabharata, Ramayana is about 1/4 of the Mahabharata, as you know very well. Mahabharata is rather a Puranic story. Its Vedic origins are not as strong as the origins of the Ramayana are. Now, the Ramayana is rather a very concise story. It's a story of 1 or 2 generations, a concise story. It doesn't mention lectures, whereas the Mahabharata mentions. The Ramayana, the poetry of Ramayana is more beautiful than the Mahabharata. The war of Ramayana is rather imaginary. It is a very unequal war. You can very well say that. Because there is a whole army of Ravana, which is a standing army, a trained army, so to say, or it is likely to be a trained army, and it has to fight with Vanaras, with Bhallukas, which we don't know whether they are trained or not. And only 2 warriors, namely Rama and Lakshmana, they have the commonly used weapons, bows and arrows, etc. So it is a war between unequals, whereas the Mahabharata war is not a war fought between technologically unequal people. Now you see, there is abduction of Sita in the Ramayana, and there is abduction of Draupadi in the Mahabharata. But Sita has to perform Agni Devya, whereas Draupadi doesn't have to. That's the major difference, you see. There are no rules set in the war of Ramayana. It is not a dharma yuddha, so to say. There are no fixed war dharmas. Whereas the war of the Mahabharata has fixed war dharmas. So there are so many differences, so many distinctions between the 2 stories. But yet the similarity remains that both these are Mahakavyas. Now, the Ramakatha, as it appears in the Ramayana of Valmiki, is being seen by you in other lectures as well. So my job is to take you to the different Ramakathas. So the Buddhist Ramakatha, which is the Dasharatha Jataka. And Dasharatha Jataka it comes from Jataka Thavannana, which is a text translated or rather retranslated from Simvali's language to Pali. It must have got translated from Pali to Simvali in the ancient times. And now with the loss of these texts from India, they are retranslated in the 19th century and the last century, that is 20th century, from Simvalese or Burmese to Pali language. So, this story of the Dasharatha Jataka has various parts. There is a Pachupannavattu, that is the story of the present. And it says that a man lost his father and he just wanted to leave everything out of sorrow. But then the Buddha, he appeared there and he advised him not to do so. And then there is a story narrated, that is the Atitavattu, the story of the past. And this story says that Dasharatha was the king of Varanasi. Mind you, Varanasi, not Ayodhya, not Saket. The name of Ayodhya in the Buddhist texts is Saket. But this Dasharatha Jataka takes him as the king of Varanasi and not Ayodhya or Saket. So Dasharatha was the king of Varanasi. His eldest queen had 3 sons, and the eldest of them was named as Rama Pandita, and it's a very peculiar name, Pandita. Rama Pandita, Lakhana, and Sita Devi. Now here she is a sister of Rama and Lakshmana. That queen passed away. The queen of Dasharatha passed away. Then Dasharatha married another woman who had another son, and the name of this son is Bharata Kumara. Now Dasharatha was very happy, and he offered her a boon, and which she encashed when Bharata became 7 years old. And she asked for authority of the whole state for Bharata, her son. But Dasharatha did not agree to it. Then she entered into various conspiracies, and she sent Rama and Lakshmana away. Rama and Lakshmana went away. There is another version of this, that it was Dasharatha who told Rama and Lakshmana to go away because of her conspiracies. And Dasharatha stated that Rama and Lakshmana should come back only after Dasharatha has died. So they went away, they remained in exile, and they went in exile for about 12 years. In the meantime, Dasharatha dies. And then Bharata's mother wants him to become the king, but he doesn't become so, because he opposes the idea, as well as the Amatyas of Dasharatha. They also oppose this idea. And Dasharatha himself goes and he approaches Rama and brings him back. And listening to the fact that Dasharatha has died, Rama becomes very sorry. And he neither actually talks nor he weeps. Rama Pandito neva sochi na rodi. He remains like that for another 12 years after his exile. And how about the rule? Then who is the king? How is the state affairs going? The state affairs are taken care of this Bharata Kumara on behalf of Rama. And Rama has given to Bharata his own sandals. I won't call them padukas, because the description there is that these padukas are made of truna, are made of grass. So you see, grass belts used to be actually used for fastening the footwear. And it exactly resembles today's slippers, Hawaii chappal. So Rama gives him the Truna Padukas. And the moment something goes wrong, they actually rattle. And then Bharata comes to know that something is going wrong, and then he corrects it. So he can rule very well, but on behalf of Rama. And then Rama returns after 12 years. The Buddhist story tells us that Rama rules for 16,000 years. And in the next birth, it is told that Shuddhodana was nobody else but Dasharatha. Yashodhara was nobody else but Sita of the previous birth. Previous means quite earlier birth, you may say. Then Rama Pandita becomes Buddha. And Bharata was nobody else but Ananda. So Bharata takes the shape of Ananda. Rama Pandita takes the shape of the Buddha. Sita takes the shape of Yashodhara. And previously, before them, Shuddhodana takes the shape of, Dasharatha takes the shape of Shuddhodana. So here, Rama Pandita is shown as a bodhisattva, and that is Dasharatha Jataka. Now there is another story which resembles the story of the Ramayana. That is the story of Anamaka Jataka. Anamaka Jataka. Now in this story, Bodhisattva resides in jungles, in mountains. And a wicked Nag takes the shape of a sage and carries away the wife of this Bodhisattva. There is a bird who is in well acquaintance of this Bodhisattva, and he tries to save this lady. But then he is killed by that Naga. So the story of Jatayu, which appears in the Ramayana, has its source in this story, perhaps. And then Bodhisattva rescues his wife with the help of monkeys. And there too, there is a very young and small monkey who serves him the most. So there is a connection of the Vanaras, the monkeys. There is a connection of the bird. And there is a connection of the wife of Bodhisattva being abducted. So this is another aspect of the story. So Dasharatha Jataka is one aspect, and Anamaka Jataka is another aspect. There is also a story named Dasharatha Kathanaka, which is perhaps a later story, wherein the king Dasharatha has 3 queens, and the king becomes ill, and the 3rd queen asks for a boon, which is authority for her son. It is granted. But the rest of the story goes like the previous story, that son himself doesn't want to rule, and he actually doesn't accept this. And then the eldest son, he gets his authority automatically. Now what this tells us about the Ramakatha and the Ramayana is that the present day story of the Ramayana is rather a connection, a very strong bond of 2 stories. So there is one fellow whose authority is lost and that is regained. And there is another story that the wife of a person is abducted and he gets her back. So there are 2 different stories, authority and wife. So authority is gained back and wife is also rescued. These 2 stories are very effectively joined together in the present day Ramayana. And that the credit should go to Valmiki. Because you see, Rama's authority is taken away and Sita is abducted, and then Sita is regained and authority is also regained. So that's what today's Ramayana is. But at least for some time during the pre-Ramayana period, these two stories were different from each other. They were known differently, they were treated differently. And these are very effectively put together by Valmiki, and that is Valmiki's credit. Now, we shall turn to the Jaina Ramayana. See, the Jainas have 63 Mahapurushas, Trishashti Mahapurusha, 63 great men, out of which there are the 24 Tirthankaras, then there are 12 Chakravartis, 9 Baladevas, 9 Vasudevas, and 9 Prativasudevas. So Vasudevas are the heroes. Baladevas are the side heroes. And Prativasudevas are the villains. So in this respect, Rama is the Vasudeva, Lakshmana is the Baladeva, and Ravana is the Prativasudeva. Vasudeva Rama, Baladeva Lakshmana, and Prativasudeva Ravana. So these are the three which fall in the group of the 63 Mahapurushas, Trishashti Mahapurushas. Now, according to them, it won't be out of place to say here that Krishna was the Vasudeva, Baladeva was the Prativasudeva, and Jarasandha. I'm sorry, I think I made some mistake. So Krishna was Vasudeva, Balarama was Baladeva, and Jarasandha was the Prativasudeva. Now, according to the Jainas, Vanaras and Rakshasas, the two fighting forces, they were actually two branches of the Vidyadharas. Now, the Jaina Ramayana or Ramakatha, it says that Rama opposed, or at least did not like, the violence that used to be done by Ravana. He did not also like the non-vegetarian diet of the Rakshasas, particularly Ravana. And Rama himself was a completely non-violent person. And that is why in the Jaina Ramayana, it is not Rama who kills Ravana, but it is Lakshmana who kills Ravana. And since Lakshmana and Ravana both are violent, both of them go to hell, whereas only Rama goes to heaven. Now there is a Ravana Charita. Ravana asks for the hand of Shri Prabha, the sister of Vali. But Vali does not want to actually bow before the Jinn, bow before anybody except Jinn. And then Vali gives his authority to Sugriva, and takes Diksha. And it is also said that Vali tramples Ravana. Now Ravana is also shown as a Jain. But since Rama has helped Janaka against him, and in return Rama has received Sita from Janaka, Ravana is actually displeased. Then there is the story of the loss of authority of Rama, then exile. And during this exile, Ravana becomes attracted to Sita. He abducts her. But then he repents. And there is a very peculiar thought that comes into the mind of Ravana. He says that, okay, if Rama has come to rescue Sita, let us show Rama our power. Let him realize that it is some powerful person who has abducted his wife. And then let us return that lady. We are not going to have any stake on her. And so the battle is fought. So actually, they want to show that the battle is fought on a very lighter vein, actually, a very lighter tone. But as the battle begins, it becomes extremely vigorous. And then it is Lakshmana who kills Ravana. Had the decision been in the hands of Rama, he perhaps would not kill Ravana. But he would punish him for this act of abducting. But that is not the case. Lakshmana kills Ravana. There is another story of the Jainas, which is Uttara Purana of Gunabhadra. And this Uttara Purana again narrates the same thing, that it is Lakshmana who fights and Rama does not. And the army of Rama, it enters into Sri Lanka, not Sri Lanka, Lanka, by air. And after killing Ravana, Rama and Lakshmana perform a campaign, a Digvijaya, for 42 years. Both of them become Ardha Chakravartis. So Rama is the half Chakravarti and Lakshmana is also half Chakravarti. And in this Digvijaya, both of them marry many women. Lakshmana marries 16,000 women and Rama half, 8,000. So it's a completely different story which gives us very different aspects of this Rama Katha. And that's why I'm always using the word Rama Katha and not Ramayana, because Ramayana is one major and perhaps the most important text, the most spread text of the Rama Katha. But the Rama Katha is larger than Ramayana, and it certainly has various aspects that are different from the established Ramayana. Now, all these things, if you want to read in a crux, you will get them in a very beautiful book, that is Rama Katha Utpatti or Vikas by Father Kamil Bulke. I take this opportunity to speak about Father Bulke and this book. Father Bulke was a European. He was a priest and he had come to India for his usual work of clergy. He entered India in 1953. I think he was a Belgian. He entered India in 1953, 1935, sorry, 1935. And within 2 years, like any other priest, he learned the Hindi language very well. And in the course of his work, he got familiar with Ramayana and he started studying it. In 1937, he registered himself for PhD in the Allahabad University. He studied and studied and studied and submitted his dissertation in sometime in 1948 or 49. But that dissertation was rejected by the university because it was written in Hindi. Until that time, the doctoral dissertations were expected to be written only in English. So it was rejected. Father Bulke met the Vice Chancellor of the university. And he said that this is a very bad rule. It was okay when India was a colony of the Britishers. It was okay at that time to have such a rule that dissertations are to be submitted only in Hindi, only in English. But now that India is independent, you should promote your language and you should be ashamed actually to have dissertations in English. You should encourage Hindi. And the Vice Chancellor, I'm forgetting his name, he agreed to this. And he made a special case, of course, seeing the dissertation, that Father Bulke be allowed to submit in Hindi. And then that dissertation was accepted. Father Bulke got his PhD in 1950 and in the same year, the dissertation was published, Ramakatha, Utpatti aur Vikas. He continued his study. And the second edition of that dissertation came in 1962. A third edition came in 1972. It is available on the internet for free download. Father Bulke continued his work on Ramayana, on the Hindi language, and he died in India in 1982. Father Bulke in 1951 had accepted the citizenship of India. He was no longer a European. And he was a great Indian, you can say. He was awarded Padma Shri. And this book that he has written, Ramakatha Utpatti aur Vikas, is indeed a treasure trove of studies on the Ramakatha and Ramayana. In fact, there can be many subjects that can be derived from this book, even today, and worked on. So that was about the various Ramakathas which I could narrate in the given time. But then no story, or no historical story at least, should be narrated without geography. Because history without geography is a painting without canvas. And you should never do that. So let us see how the geography of the Ramakathas is. Now, I'm not going to say much about the geography of the Buddhist and the Jaina Ramakatha, but we'll deal with the geography of Ramayana vigorously. So I'm sharing my screen to you, and you'll see a map which comes from another very great atlas, and which is the atlas made by Joseph Schwarzberg and his team. And the atlas is named as Historical Atlas of South Asia. This Historical Atlas of South Asia was published twice. It was published in 1970 or around 1970, and the second edition came in 1993. Even this edition is available on the internet for free viewing, and its copies are available in some libraries in Pune, particularly the Deccan College Library. Now, this is Ayodhya, and recording na? Now this is Ayodhya. So now this is Ayodhya, and from Ayodhya, Rama proceeded to Shrungaverapura. From then there to Chitrakuta, and then he led the way to Agastya Ashrama, and then to the south, and then he went to Panchavati, from where Sita was abducted by Ravana. And then Rama and Lakshmana, in search of Sita, went to Kishkindha. We know the story, so I'm not narrating all the details of the story. But then there they met Sugriva, and then there was the chapter of Vali Vadha. They proceeded further south, and they reached the tip of the Indian subcontinent. And then from Rameshwara to Dhanushakodi, and then what is called as Rama Setu, they crossed the sea and proceeded to Lanka, and Schwarzberg takes Kandy as the place of Lanka, or somewhere near Kandy. Now, it is not that everybody agrees with this theory of Lanka being Sri Lanka of today, or Ceylon of today. There are some archaeologists like Professor H.D. Sanklia, a very renowned archaeologist and ex-director of the Deccan College, who believed that Lanka falls somewhere in central India only. And Schwarzberg has carefully depicted even this theory as another theory in his atlas. So this comprehensiveness of Schwarzberg should also be appreciated. Now, Sanklia believes that Ayodhya, as an excavation, as a historical city, had only small houses of mud bricks, and it didn't have any palaces as such. So how can the palaces be there? The palaces described in Ramayana, there are no palaces at Ayodhya. That's what he has shown. And then he has made a very important point that Lanka is a peak or a raised land, a tableland. And it is not necessary that Lanka should be Sri Lanka. In fact, the ancient name of today's Sri Lanka was Simhala Dweep. You will find the name Lanka or Sri Lanka only after the 10th or 11th century, when the story of Ramayana reached far south, until you see the kingdom of the Cholas, the Pandyas. So till then, Sri Lanka was known as Simhala. So it is not necessary that today's Sri Lanka was ancient Lanka. Now, another very important point that Sankhya has made is that Lanka is far south, far away, and there is no mention of the river Narmada in the Ramakatha or in the Ramayana. So there is no mention of Narmada river, which was a major river of the country at that time and even today. So how is it that if Narmada is not mentioned, how can one believe that Ram had crossed Narmada and went to the south and to far south? But anybody will say that there is a mention of Godavari. No matter whether Rama has crossed Narmada or not, there is a mention of Godavari. But actually there is another river named Godavari in central India as well. So it can be that. There is a parallel to this. Kharavela's inscription mentions that he had defeated the Satavahanas on the banks of Kandhabenna. And the earlier interpretation was that the Satavahanas were defeated on the banks of Krishna and Venna, that is somewhere in Satara district. And that means that the whole kingdom of the Satavahanas was devastated by Kharavela. But Mirashi proved that it is not these Kandhabennas, Krishna and Venna. The Kandhabennas in Kharavela's inscription are Kanhan and Vainaganga, which are in Vidarbha. So, in fact, Kharavela could not enter the territory of Satavahanas. They might have been defeated on the confluence of Kandhabenna, as Kharavela inscription states. But certainly Kharavela could not enter their territory. He could not invade the core territory of Satavahanas. So there is a similar case here, that there is no mention of Narmada in the Ramayana. And Godavari, you can find another Godavari in central India. And places that resemble Kishkinda or Pampa Lake or Panchavati, they can be found in central India itself, in the north of Narmada. So you see, this is Narmada river. This is Narmada. And Sankhya's Lanka falls in the north of Narmada. It's in central India. Now, this is quite an agreeable theory. And Sankhya has given another evidence that there is a mention of the jungles of Shal trees in Lanka. And today Sri Lanka or its vicinity doesn't have any Shala trees, and the atmosphere there or the surroundings there are not also conducive for that. Whereas in central India, you will find jungles of Shala trees. So Lanka can be located only there. There is no reason why one should take today's Sri Lanka as the Lanka of Ravana. Now, I have put forth both the cases, the popular belief as also the theory of Sankhya. Now, there is another point here, that today's Sri Lanka doesn't have any reliable archaeological sources or finds to prove that it was the capital or the kingdom of Ravana. So today's Lanka doesn't have anything that is reliable. All those things that are shown are either artificial or they are relatively very modern. So Sankhya's theory has certainly water in it. But then there was another very important man in Pune named Dr. S.V. Bhave, who had tried his way to prove that Valmiki Ramayana and particularly Kalidasa Raghuvamsha, in which the path or the course of Rama from Lanka to Ayodhya has been depicted well. And that is an aerial, you see, view. Dr. S.V. Bhave, who was a medical doctor, he had his own small aeroplane and he flew from Lanka, that is Sri Lanka, to Ayodhya. And then it is said that that Pushpaka Vimana, it finally retired to Allahabad. So he took this way. So from Lanka, he flew to Malaya Parvata. Then he located Mahendragiri. Now today, Mahendragiri is located in Andhra Pradesh, but he has located one here. Then Anegundi, according to him, is Kishkindha. Then he went to Panchavati, then Lonar, and he thinks that Lonar is the Panchapsaras lake. Then Chitrakoot, Nandigram, Ayodhya, and finally that Pushpaka, it retired in Allahabad, that is Prayag. That's what Bhave has tried to show from his study of Raghuvamsha as also his own flight through his own plane. Thankfully, he has not said that Kalidasa had boarded any plane. Now, let us, towards the end of this lecture, let us see some pictures from Bhave's book, Ramacha Padachinnanvarun Pushpak Vimanane Pankha Pasarle. That is a long title of his book. And here is the Matanga Nakra, an island which Bhave has shown and which appears in the Raghuvamsha. It is connected with the story of Hanuman, which is a famous story. Now there is another view, and Bhave is standing between Lanka, Sri Lanka and India on a particular rock, and he says that this is the course of Rama Setu. Now it is proved that there is a certain actually range, underground range, which passes from the land of India to Sri Lanka. And that's what he has claimed, that this is the Rama Setu. So you have the boat here and Dr. Bhave standing on that range, which is believed to be Rama Setu today. And then this Panchapsaras lake, according to him, and which is nothing else but the Lonar salt lake, which was caused due to a meteor. What I mean to say is that there are immense possibilities for studies in Ramayana and Ramakatha particularly. And Ramakatha is not, it is a complicated story which is told by so many scholars and authors in their own way, right from the ancient times till the modern times. So you will find it as you look at it. And why should all this be done? Tulsidas has narrated very well, Swantas Sukhaya Tulasi Raghunatha Gatha. I again congratulate the authorities of the Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth and the Balmukunda Lohia department. And wish to stop here. Thank you.